I can control exactly what AI says about my business.
That's Steve Toth, founder of SEO Notebook and AI Notebook, a go-to advisor to 20,000 plus marketers and the strategist growth stage agencies call when they want AI to sell for them. He's the former SEO lead at FreshBooks, where he ranked #1 for a 300,000 volume keyword and quintupled their traffic in under a year. Today, Steve helps brands move beyond rankings and engineer how ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini talk about them in real buyer conversations. But how does he do it?
I've interrogated LLMs with thousands of real buyer questions, and what we're seeing is...
In this episode, you'll learn why showing up in AI answers isn't enough.
Showing up in a response is awesome, but things can go sideways pretty fast if it starts saying the wrong things about your business.
Why most agencies lose control of their message in generative search and how to fix it.
It's going to go to the web to try to answer that question. Problem is not all the information on the web is correct.
How to influence how LLMs talk about your brand in real buying conversations.
We know that is highly influential with a lot of buying decisions and that people trust it a lot more than, just reading it on your website.
Do you think that most businesses out there understand how they're being talked about by AI and the questions that the AI is receiving about their business?
If your question is do they know about it? Is the question is, have you searched an LLM the way your ICP would have, right? A good starting point for any business is just to ask the LLM hey, what do you know about me? And then kind of go from there with respect to deal breaker type of questions around pricing, around fit, around offering services, case studies, really interrogating the LLM to see how well you're being represented, and then really understanding about what sources of information the LLM is using to tell that story about you is kind of the next logical step in terms of understanding, how to influence what it says about you. We launched a bot called Deal Breaker Detector. And what that does is basically you would put in your niche, and it would generate a bunch of deal breaker type of questions that your ICP would ask. A little tip that I can give is if you go on our website, which is notebook.agency, and you scroll to the footer, there's a small link on the bottom right-hand corner called Hey AI, Learn About Us. And in that file, it's a markdown file that talks about our client portfolio, our services, our specialties. And if you ask ChatGPT, what do you know about Notebook Agency? It sources that file to create a lot of information. So it's a lot of what it knows about us, right? So having a file like that on your site where you've basically laid it all out in very, clear, easy to understand markdown format for an LLM, it's a great way to kind of shortcut, putting your best foot forward. But when it comes to specific questions, that's where sort of your broader footprint on third-party websites and also, what is listed on, across your website start to matter more.
So to the content that you're producing and that you have on your website, are there any sort of structures that you recommend that helps the AI better understand the business?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the native strengths of LLMs is actually being able to compare you against other brands, right? So comparison content where it's company A versus company B can be really powerful vessels for teaching the LLM about, everything that you do and how you, uniquely service your clients. But what we also like to do in terms of, our structures is get hyper specific about the types of things that we compare, right? Maybe if you were trying to speak more to the Vendesta, user is SEO for roofing companies. Well, how does company A versus company B compare when it comes to, SEO case studies for roofing companies? So actually coming up with comparison content that is not just company A versus company B, but company A versus company B on something hyper specific. That is, essentially serving up the information for an LLM on a silver platter for them to essentially retrieve. Because if you have a chat with an LLM, 9 times out of 10, it's going to say, do you want me to compare other services or comparable vendors, right? Because that's a strength that it has. So by creating that, very hyper specific comparison content, it's going to retrieve what it knows is relevant to the user because of what that user, even what it knows about the user without the user even having to say because of all the chat history, but also with what the user says is explicitly important to them. If you use ChatGPT Deep Research, it asks you a bunch of qualifying questions before it goes and does all that research for you. It asks you things like, what is your budget? Do you want comparisons? Who are you? What is your company size? It asks you all of those things to basically create a relevant answer. So by understanding the types of clarification questions that the LLM wants to ask you, you can better tune your content to answer those types of questions.
What's separating, the businesses out there that are, just casually mentioned versus the ones that are sort of confidently recommended, by the engines?
Yeah, I mean, like on a base level, like your overall brand presence is what determines your eligibility for being mentioned in an LLM. So, how much do people know you in the real world? Like, what is your following on YouTube, et cetera? Your footprint is really like, one of the most important things just to get in the race. But the brands that, understand like things like reputation management and, doing lots of podcasts, having reviews on you, those types of things. Those are the brands that I think are faring the best so far.
When we were talking a few minutes ago about the auditing process, you spoke a little bit about some off-page factors. Are there any particular ones specifically that you think that companies should pay attention to?
Reddit, 100%. So whenever anything is wrong about a company, you can be assured that there's somebody complaining about it on Reddit. And, the fact that things can change, right? And companies can adapt and companies can get better. Sometimes some of those outdated narratives are still, influencing people's decision making because the fact is, like, maybe it was true at a time, but things have now changed, right? So understanding the landscape of social chatter out there that is has to do with your brand is extremely important to be aware of. And it doesn't mean like spamming that same thread with a bunch of links back to your website, but simply like going on to that thread and like explaining that, hey, you know what, we've actually listened to your feedback and we've changed things, and this is like some of the great things that we've worked on to essentially satisfy this contention. And you do that in an information retrieval friendly way, which the LLM is more likely to pick up next time it visits that page. Those things end up making a huge difference in terms, and it's silent, right? It's not something that's like visible, right? But we know that Reddit is highly influential with a lot of buying decisions, and that people trust it a lot more than just reading it on your website. So I would say that is definitely one place, but also just like your reviews, right? Like what your customers say about you. On Google business profiles, on Trustpilot, on G2, et cetera, et cetera. Those are also really important areas where you want to be reflecting, the great work that you're doing to improve your customers' experience, and making sure that you're propagating that kind of positive information across the web. But really, like, what you have to realize is that every touch point that you make publicly online has the potential to influence what the LLM knows about you. Even this very podcast where I'm talking about notebook agency framework, that transcript is going to be analyzed by an LLM, and it's going to, play a part, be it a small or a large part, in influencing, what an LLM understands about, me and Steve Toth and his agency, Notebook Agency, right? So just understanding that, like, all of those touch points that you have which are essentially brand building exercises at the end of the day. It really does matter how you speak about yourself in these kinds of forums, in terms of how the LLM is going to shape its understanding of you.
Have you seen examples and real world examples of how a business is able to flip the representation with just a few changes?
There's an example that I highlighted in a course that I taught for CXL, where there was a gentleman who owns a company called Common Room. And the thing that he realized was he kind of pivoted the focus of his business during kind of with the advent of AI. And when he asked ChatGPT what it knew about his business, it was kind of reflecting the old narrative of what he used to do, and it wasn't our accurate representation. So he basically deleted a lot of old YouTube videos. He consolidated and redirected a bunch of old information on his website that didn't accurately reflect his current positioning, and basically went through an exercise of cleaning up his brand narrative in a relatively short amount of period of time. We're talking a few months, by doing some of that conscious cleaning up.
You feel like there's a whole new layer here of SEO that agencies should be thinking about going forward?
I mean, I don't even know if we should be thinking about it in terms of SEO versus your brand presence, right? So, I mean, our companies spend inordinately more money on branding activities than they ever did on search engine optimization. So my question is does this become a new focus for your branding versus you thinking about this as an SEO initiative?
For an agency that focuses on this type of work and helping other businesses be seen by AI, how should they be talking about the value of that to clients and to prospective clients that they have?
Ahrefs released a study where they said only 0.5% of their traffic is coming from LLMs, but it counts for 12% of their signups. And those signups are converting at 22x higher than Google traffic, right? So just imagine when that's not only 0.5% of traffic, but a much larger percentage. And even if the traffic is not directly attributable to ChatGPT or what have you, we know that LLMs are in the mix of these touch points that people are effectively having before they choose to talk to you, right? So really stressing that to your clients and kind of framing the traffic that we will get, even though it's in smaller numbers, is going to be more highly qualified. Because like I said, if I'm searching a project management software, I'm going to tell the AI that, I've got 30 people on my team. My budget is $20 per head. Gantt charts and time tracking are important to me. And, I want something that has great user reviews, right? So getting to the heart of exactly what you want is what LLMs kind of offer the user. And, there's just so many touch points previously in the journey that were, random websites, YouTube videos, newsletters, friends recommendations. And now, a lot of that getting, having AI into the mix. We use AI on a daily basis to, solve all kinds of, problems and challenges that we're having, when it comes to, opening your wallet to make a purchase, whether it's a new vendor or a new software or what have you. There's no way that we're not going to be consulting AI to make those important decisions. So, I'm not going to have to jump on a sales call with something that is going to be, totally off base for what my needs are, that I have effectively qualified myself, through a chat with an LLM, hopefully with the LLM representing the business accurately, but at least, getting closer to what I want, and then really using the sales call to kind of, validate the things that I think are true about that company. That would be kind of the way that I would shape it. But, even I think we also have to have the conversation that the huge up and to the right traffic graphs that we used to, really pride ourselves on, are not going to come back. And, that ultimately, I think they were pretty noisy, right? So a lot of that is like mid to top of funnel traffic. It's not necessarily the traffic that converted. There is some collateral damage that comes out of not being able to have MoFu and TOFU traffic. Things like retargeting, building email lists are probably harder now in the age of AI. So it's a nuanced conversation that we have to have. But I think ultimately the potential of AI to deliver the inordinately, again, I'm using that word, but higher quality traffic than we've ever seen before is how we have to sell this.